Num num. Num num. Birdie num num.
When I have understanding of computers, I shall be the supreme being. God isn't interested in technology. He knows nothing of the potential of the microchip or the silicon revolution. Look how he spends his time. 43 species of parrots. Nipples for men.
Don't do that, Jesus Christ! You're gonna get me killed! Out of here!
Oh, Billy. Ah!
Welcome, everybody. Yes, 43 species of parrots, and probably less, as this show focuses on the environmental disaster that has been happening and is happening. Welcome, everybody, officially to our latest Aeon Bite Live. This is Groundhog Day, the day of eternal return, as Nietzsche, Ouspensky, and the Stoics talked about. Oddly enough, it's also the 33rd day of the year, as my friend Nate mentioned. So a lot of energies going on today. But as always, we will bring you that gnosis so that you can do what you want with it and wake up even more, because we need it more than ever. So glad to see everybody already in the chat room. And tonight we have, a very special show. With us, we've got Matthew Landman. Matthew, thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on. I was just telling my friend about an hour ago that it's the 33rd day of the year as well, and I even saw it at 2:22 on this whole 2 thing, which is interesting. But astrologically, I was reading up on it. There's a lot of stuff going on, and evidently, like the 22nd coming up is like Pluto's return. It's like the exact spot Pluto was in during the Revolutionary War. It's like full circle and some sort of path where that portal's kind of opening up. I don't even know. Anyways, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, pleasure is all ours. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the stars, as above, so below. And again, as we were talking before, I watched your documentary FrankenSkies, and it was well made. It was a full package, funny, inspirational, but still, I was very alarmed at the end. But I'm very happy you created it, and we certainly want to talk a little bit about your work as an activist and your views on what's going on. But before, let us introduce to the Moondog Vance. Vance, did you see your shadow today? 6 more weeks of gnosis?
Oh, I saw about 5 shadows today, all around me, and my inner Carl Jung shadow, and
Yeah.
and dark
Awesome.
shadows. I even watched that today. No.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well,
Waiting for a good show here. Yeah, same here.
And you'll be taking care of the chat room.
Do my best.
Taking care of business. And for you in the chat room, you know how it is. If you have questions for Vance, please write them in all caps or put a lot of question marks. We will give you preference if you have a super chat. There are no guarantees. We will get to your question, but Vance really does try to get to everybody. So, keep it in mind there, especially as the audience grows even more as the show goes on. Other than that, there's some housekeeping things going on, but I will get to them later in the show. For those of you who are interested in the Astronosis Conference on March 20 to 22nd, keep in mind that I will have finally the speaker list coming out probably this week. So there will be a calendar of when the speakers are talking. We'll have more on the pyramid visit, since it's in Playa del Carmen, which will be on the 3rd day, and it's very cool. And everything is starting to flesh out. We are open for sponsorships. I already got some very cool sponsors, publishers, and other big names. But if you're interested in talking about your book or anything else at the conference or in one of these shows, want to be a sponsor, let me know and I'll take care of you. So things are coming together as the stars are coming together in this already very strange year, which is already going so fast. It's already February, just blinked. Anyway, I'll have more housekeeping as we go. So why don't we start with you, Matthew? when did you become interested in the more esoteric topics?
Well, that's for me, it's been a slow journey, which it's very interesting to see the children now. These children are waking up to everything so fast right now, as we speak. 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10 years old, 10-year-olds is in their face, which is very fascinating. The children that are being shown, the reality of things as all of this nonsense unravels. But for me, it was slow and steady. I lived in the DC area during 9/11, and none of that really, I didn't know anything was inside job or anything like that until a couple years later, and it was a movie. I watched the movie Loose Change and then another movie called Zeitgeist, and that was someone's artistic expose of the truth in these different aspects, and I'd never seen anything like it. And that really kind of just opened my mind. My friend growing up, I had this one friend I used to hang out with all the time, and he was a great peer, a great friend that had different views on spirituality. He actually could see color auras, and that really opened me up to seeing the world through his eyes and seeing the world through a different lens. And so it's very slow and steady. I once I learned about that whole zeitgeist perspective on the financial system and on religion, and on, because zeitgeist is broken into 3 parts, I was really inspired to see the world a little differently. And I kind of was never able to be put inside a box, and I had all sorts of jobs and walks of life. And eventually I ended up in Northern California going to grad school, going back to school, getting a business degree and a film degree. And even then I was kind of just on the cusp, and I graduated with the master's in business administration, taught my class in 2010. Arnold Schwarzenegger signed that degree from Cal State, San Diego of Humboldt, Northern California. And afterwards, I worked on a farm. And on that farm, I really got grounded. Growing organic vegetables, I learned so much that I knew so little. And it's so fascinating what I learned. One of the biggest aspects was food. I thought I knew so much, but I didn't even know potatoes, if you put them in the ground, that they would just grow potatoes. It's this abundance that was kept from me in all of my education. And once I started to realize that I didn't know much, I got really connected to the earth and the ground and the sky. And I slowly but surely woke up to weather engineering. Right before my eyes, I witnessed chemtrails. It's like such a dirty word. I didn't even know if I could say it. I stopped for a second.
That's fine.
But yeah,
far worse today things you can't say. Chemtrails is now kind of vanilla again.
No kidding. Yeah, it is. But at that time, it was so mum. And when I first came onto it, is actually back to that friend that I grew up with that could see color auras. We were talking on the phone, and I was in grad school or I'd just gotten out of grad school, but all my friends were still in college and stuff and younger. And I was venting to him that nobody really was aware of these certain things like eating healthy or 9/11 and this and that. And he just said the word chemtrails to me. He said, well, what about chemtrails? That's in everyone's faces. At least they weren't there during 9/11. Some kids weren't even born, And I can empathize. If they weren't there, they go on Google. There's 2 sides to the story. They can't make a solid judgment. Some of us were right there. Like my girlfriend went to Pace University. It's right next to the Twin Towers. Like she was right there during it all, and I was right there during it all. In Herndon, Virginia, right next to Dulles Airport, where a couple planes took off and never landed, full of people. And so all of this kind of was close to home for me. But all the way down the line, years later, just the word chemtrails, and this is the power of the seed. Planting the seed is so powerful. This is what you all do on the show. It's just, and what everyone can do with their conversations and their word and their truth and their voice. It's the vibration that we put out. It's so powerful that it ripples. So my friend just said, Matt, you don't know about chemtrails? Look it up. I looked it up. I witnessed weather engineering firsthand. I realized nobody knew anything about it. And that kind of lit this fire for me, because nobody knew about something that was right in my face. And if no one knew about it, then I should maybe sound the alarm and what have you. And I went really deep, and it got really spiritual, and I ended up making the movie. And it was this unbelievable journey. And I'm almost done. What I learned, I didn't want to have to go there. Who wants to be a chemtrail activist? I was like, oh, who knows?
That's something you said as a kid. Mommy, daddy, when I grow up.
Exactly. The answer to that is I want to be an astronaut. That's the answer.
Yeah, right.
And then I wanted to be a marine biologist. and as growing up. And I mean, who wants to be that, like the critique of your peers and losing all that and your family and your grandmother and all these sort of things. But at the end of the day, because nobody knew about it, it was a sensitive topic, and I gave it a lot of thought. And I did not become an activist at first, but then I had a spiritual kind of rite of passage of a handful of those recently, but this was the very beginning. And I was shown that there's darkness on earth, that there's literal darkness. And by knowing that there's darkness, which is what's happening right now in slow motion for everybody on earth, I witnessed darkness, and I had this full about face. Well, if there's darkness, then there's duality, and this duality thing is real. And if there's darkness, then there's light. And which one am I? You know, because I'm something in there, and I'm not right in the middle because it's duality here. You know, you got to pick a kind of a side, or not really pick a side, as you are on a side, and you are the light. Everyone listening, you are the light. And as the darkness shows itself more and more, you learn that you are not that, and you are the light to be the light for everyone else and all this stuff. It's like amazing, the journey that we're on to realize who we are and our full potential and the power of the truth, and that there's light and darkness on earth and all this stuff. But I had to see darkness to know that there was light. And then I knew that chemtrails were darkness, and that I had to like expose the light on that and fight it and all that stuff. So I made FrankenSkies and did all these conferences and made myself into a chemtrail activist. And that later segued into an EMF, holistic kind of activist as well, like all sorts of things, because the activist wears many hats. You cannot be half pregnant with the truth. Either you're with the truth or you're not. You know, you can't just pick one thing, really, is what it came down to, because truth is like a frequency, a vibration. You get on that truth, and all these other vibrations of truth become self-evident. So my journey became more and more truths, and here we are.
Oh, what a wonderful journey. I want to talk a little bit more about your experiences, but yeah, the chemtrails, I never really have gone down that rabbit hole. I mean, whatever you want to call it, conspiracy theory, alternative history, or I like the saying, what's a conspiracy? It's history plus time. Everything starts to reveal itself if you're patient, or something, like you have poise, even though it's hard. But I never had, my wife is like freaked out about him. And I used to watch Tracy Twyman used to put these live YouTube videos of the sky, and she'd be like, this is not the same sky when I was a kid, and da da da, and whatever. I always trusted her when because she was the perfect balance of intuition and brain. She was amazing, but I haven't gone as deep as I'd like to. But you were saying, yeah, the resistance for chemtrails. Do you think this is manufactured? Because I'm sure, like Vince and I can remember the days with acid rain, and nobody freaked out, Vince. Remember, everybody just looked at the science, and there was nobody really taking sides. It was something that everybody was like, this makes sense. This is bad. It's obviously the skies are poison. What do you think, Vince? I mean,
well, yeah,
nobody was saying you're a loony and you're not.
No. People were worried about the finishes on their cars, for one thing, right? Remember that?
They could see it. Yeah, they could see it happening in Ohio and other places.
Yep. Acid rain.
Yeah, but why do you think, Matt, there's such a visceral reaction for this alternative? You think it's manufactured? They're saying, we're not going to allow that. We're not even going to consider it.
Well, the word chemtrails is similar to the modern day flat Earth. So if you start talking about conspiracy, people will say, "Oh, you're one of those flat earthers," because the conversation surrounding that has been hijacked. So a lot of people are naive and they have good hearts, and I'm sorry to say we all have really good hearts, and a lot of us are really very, very naive in this whole concept of controlled opposition. But imagine, like, sometimes you have to put yourself in these boardrooms, in these think tanks of evil people, all evil people at this think tank, figuring out how they're going to enslave humanity by 2030 and introduce transhumanism and all this evil stuff. It's just like, wow, how could we get from A to Z? But they're working on it, And part of that evil is controlling narrative, controlling consciousness, controlling the dialogue around sort of things. If you can control the narrative of a situation, you can control the outcome they think. Okay, it's like a Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. They make the way we perceive these topics conspiratorial or whatever by controlling it. So we had the Black Panthers decades ago, and they could have been a threat to the government, to the institutions. So they were infiltrated and then controlled from within by people that are called controlled opposition. They would be agent provocateurs, make them look bad through violence or whatever they do in conjunction with the media and the social engineering and everything. They end up making themselves look bad and they get defeated from within. After that, the CIA or the government or whoever they are, because they might not even be good, because if you look back at Operation Paperclip and World War II and stuff, we may not even won that war. Who knows what this real spiritual battle it really is right now. I firmly believe World War III is ongoing. It's a spiritual battle, and it really started on 9/11, but may have been going on with Operation Paperclip and even before that. You know, how did Nazi scientists form NASA and form MK Ultra programs in the United States and stuff like that? Why were they given the keys to these extreme programs that form Hollywood and stuff like that? That it wouldn't make any sense if they were our enemies, and we won that war. So there's some questions there I would ask. So the concept of controlled opposition goes far back, and nowadays, instead of infiltrating groups, they just create groups from the very get-go, which is mind-boggling. So when the idea of engineering the weather and all this, and the skies were going to be changing, and in the mid-90s, you start to see a lot more lines in the sky. There's a handful of groups that are really in on it. One of them is NASA with the budget of $52 million a day. They have a chemtrail program called CARE, C-A-R-E, the Charged Aerosol Release Experiment Program. C-A-R-E is the acronym for it. You've also got the Tropospheric Aerosol Program through the Department of Energy. You've got SPICE, Stratospheric Particle Injection for Climate Engineering. It's an ongoing program. You've got Solar Radiation Management, SRM. You've got SRMGI, Solar Radiation Management Governance Initiative. SRMGI.gov is the website. You've got all of these like different institutions, basically, like NASA or the CIA, who talks about their Stratospheric Aerosol Injections Program, SAI, right? It's all different programs, ongoing. It really got beefed up in the 90s. So instead of having people slowly wake up and be like, oh, what's that? They controlled the awakening, perception, verbiage, everything. And they, number one, they polarized the argument and had us arguing falsehoods, which is confusing, and made everyone confused. Is that a contrail? Is that a chemtrail? And made this whole contrail science, which is all nonsense. And I can get to that. And it's this talk that there's like condensation from your breath. You know, when you're at ground level on a cold day and you've got condensation coming out, like steam from your breath, and you blow the hot air. They say that there's hot air coming out of jets, and that makes this condensation of moisture dependent on conditions because of hot air coming out of the engines of the jets. But these planes are not releasing hot air. They're just fans. The way that they're built, they're just pushing air over the wing, creating lift, just like a propeller would. Okay, so a short trail, long trail, they get us debating these things. They're just different chemicals. They look differently. They're mixing different chemicals in the sky, and they make it this confusing thing, getting you to debate it. There are like F-16 fighter jets and stuff like that that have hot air because they're blasting super fast, and that makes that, sometimes it makes a little short thing, you know, but it's not what we're dealing with overall. So they make it really confusing. So the first idea of the chemtrail is introduced by crazy activists, literally like riddled the streets of like the West Coast, like Portland, San Francisco, LA, and stuff like that, Venice Beach, with homeless CIA agent looking, I mean, actual CIA agents, but looking to be homeless people, like they're pretending, and they're pictures of chemtrails and acting all crazy, like the government's poisoning you. Okay, so they introduced it to the concept of the consciousness as it's a crazy conspiracy, the government is poisoning you and trying to kill you. It's not necessarily that. It's controlling the weather. It's creating this whole geoengineering thing, dimming of the sun to combat global warming, which is a farce in and of itself. And it's all, you know, very deep and well calculated and ongoing for like decades. This slow attack on our, what ends up being our life source, our light code, our download codes, to like our ascension codes. I mean, the sun isn't just some ball of gas, okay? Neither is the moon what they say it is. And these light sources, they help us along our progression. And there's some actual evil that wants to disrupt that. They're not trying to save us from global warming, you guys. But this concept of geoengineering is introduced just as I introduced. So I was really trying to come out with FrankenSkies in 2015, 2016. Literal like divine intervention. I couldn't come out with it because of financial things and all this. And right before I was about to release it, they started coming out with new cloud names and the concept of geoengineering in the public media, saying we need this idea of spraying the skies. It looks just like chemtrails, but don't worry, it's not chemtrails. It's called geoengineering. We're going to do this to your skies with aluminum to save you from global warming. And I was able to include a little bit in the movie, thankfully. But now it's gotten totally crazy that this concept is in the public consciousness. But they were so the first time somebody brings a concept to someone, I envision it as plowing snow to an idea. So you've got like a mental pathway dug to the concept, and now it's like you see it a certain way that because someone got to you first. The snow can be dug a different way, to the truth. But at the first encounter, if someone's first introduced you to chemtrails as this crazy loony thing, which is easy if you can control the narrative online through the controlled different aspects, different channels are all controlled. And you even have controlled people saying these words all crazy. Like when I really dug into the Department of Energy, and they having a chemtrail program starting in 2001, right before 9/11, their budget for risk aversion and detection assessment, meaning like not getting caught doing what they're doing, their budget's $5.5 million in just 2001, and it's extrapolated like more. It increases every year. The budget goes up every year. They're spending in this document, which is easy to find actually, TAPDOE PDF, Tropospheric Aerosol Program, Department of Energy PDF file. And it's this hidden in plain sight kind of document where they don't say the word geoengineering, chemtrails, or contrails, but when they're doing contrail spraying, they call it precursor gases, where they're laying out something to spray something else on top of it. And they're doing all this hidden in plain sight research, which gets really weird when you realize that they created a left-right paradigm where dirty energy is on one side and green is on the other. And the opposition to geoengineering is dirty energy, because they say, no, global warming is not real. It's not our fault. And we don't need to geoengineer. But that makes people have this reverse psychology to think, oh, well, I must be pro-green, and that means I'm pro-geoengineering, which is saving us from global warming, which is chemtrails, which people don't even realize. So they're asking for their own like ice age or something and disconnecting them from source, and it can get really spiritual and stuff. And that's kind of where we can take the show. So it's fascinating, but they've controlled their vernacular through controlled opposition, like people writing books and being really like completely conspiratorial. If you take something and go too much with it, the first time people hear it, they dismiss it because it just sounds really crazy to them, But if it's like, oh, hey, guess what? In 1915, this guy, Professor Hatfield, he seeded clouds and made it rain in San Diego. And since then, that technology has been worked upon. Watch FrankenSkies and you can see the historical chronological timeline of FrankenSkies. It's an expose of that, and it starts in 1922. Gets you to modern day with footage that I got, but first you got to get up to speed that in 1922, the U.S. Air Force is filming themselves perfect their tools to controlling the weather. So by now it's like, oh wait, when they say drought, when they say hurricane, when they say tornado, when they say all these fires and stuff, they can seed clouds over fires and make it rain. They can exacerbate or quell hurricanes and tornadoes and all these sort of things. And they have this tool belt that they don't use, don't tell you about. And the questions start to, the rabbit hole begins there, really,
Oh, thanks for that. That's well said. Yeah, even yesterday there was an article in Forbes talking about using seeding or other geoengineering to dim the sun to help global warming. And I'm like, oh my God, at first that's like out of a Simpsons episode where Monty is trying to, block out the sun so that everybody will use more nuclear energy, Monty Burns. But I was like, man, this playing God cannot mean what could possibly go wrong, right? Every time man tries to play God, what can go wrong? And as you said, this has been going on forever. In fact, there is one scene which is so typical of our government, Matt. You talk about how they've already used the skies to test humans. The army conducted secret weather experiments on the people of St. Louis in the in the 60s, sorry, in the 60s, and on Corpus Christi too, the town of Corpus Christi in Texas. So they've already been experimenting on humans to see what happens in our own land.
The St. Louis one is really something, and that's in FrankenSkies, a reporter through Freedom of Information exposed it, and that's where you get the fine line between, not fine line, but there's the word chemtrails is all encompassing. It includes, it's spraying different chemicals in the sky from jets usually. But in this instance in St. Louis, when they're experimenting on the population, which makes you really question our government, they're spraying radioactive cadmium. Radioactive cadmium. It's zinc cadmium sulfide, it's called. I'm pretty sure. They're spraying radioactive cadmium using jets, using sprayers on top of buildings, and they even outfit station wagons, and they're on the ground level going through spraying this toxic chemical just for research, only to see what it does to children's lungs, how fast these children basically die from cancer of it in these projects. And that's our people and that's our government. So if you start to ask questions from that point forth, but that's too conspiratorial for some people, but it's the reality for once you get going on this subject. So sometimes they're spraying lithium, sometimes they're experimenting on you, and you can do the research and find out that they actually do it, and they have sprayed and they do different experimental things. You know, they experiment with pathogens. They experiment with aluminum alone is toxic. And if you start to learn about aluminum and, oh, let's watch that video. Can we watch the aluminum mercury video that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah,
this is
let's
really
put it on.
important. So
All right.
this,
I'll add it on and
so okay, so in activism, aluminum is like one of these things that crosses all these different thresholds, because aluminum, when you melt aluminum, that's where fluoride comes from. It's a byproduct of the aluminum industry, and then it's a neurotoxin. It's put in toothpaste and drinking water, and you should avoid it at all costs. Also, aluminum reacts. So aluminum and fluoride react together and bond with each other, and the aluminum will actually pull fluoride into your brain and cross the blood-brain barrier, and then those two things react, and you have a chemical reaction, Alzheimer's, in your brain from aluminum and fluoride. Also, imagine you have mercury fillings, okay? So mercury fillings are like silver composite or whatever, but they've got mercury in them. You can get these holistically removed, and I highly recommend it. But if you've got mercury fillings and then you're getting aluminum in your diet through your deodorant, through the chemtrails, through your food, through all these different things, these two chemicals mix in your body or your brain, especially your brain, to cause dementia and stuff. And this is what happens. This video we're watching is when you mix aluminum and mercury. These two chemicals are being exposed to us in micro levels. Like should not have mercury twirly light bulbs. Those things break and you get toxic mercury in your system. You should not have mercury fillings in your mouth. I'm sorry if you do. Empower yourselves to get that removed from a holistic doctor and whatnot. They slowly off gas as you chew and whatnot, and it gets in your system. Don't use aluminum deodorant. Women are putting aluminum deodorant in their armpits where they should be detoxing from their armpits, and they're doing the opposite, and that pools in your lymphs. And then you put a cell phone near you or even up to your head or in your bra, heaven forbid, and that's literally like putting microwave aluminum in the microwave, and that's how you get breast cancer. I'm reading a book, Conversations with the Aluminum Atom, and this doctor says that 100% of breast cancer cases come from that combination of cell phone and aluminum deodorant. It's unreal if you start to think about it. But that was just a micro level of a little bit of aluminum and mercury mixed together. Imagine that being in your brain. And when you start to see people with dementia, and they can't even think for themselves, it's because these chemicals are mixing together. I mean, can you imagine? This is no bueno. So then you think about the heavy topic nowadays of the ingredients that people are putting in their bodies through these inoculations, whatnot, and the chemicals in this are both these things. There's both these things in those common ingredients were the aluminum and the adjuvant which was mercury, but it was what is it called? I can't think off the top of my head. But there's an adjuvant of these two things mixing together in the common like flu inoculations and all that sort of stuff. So it's like knowing these things and avoiding them is totally important, like for your health and well-being, right? And then detoxing, learning how to detox and chelate. And I've learned so much about mineralization recently. I take every single day these. It's called Irish sea moss, but really it's just a seaweed. But it's got nearly 100 bioavailable minerals. We don't get hardly any of the minerals that are rare, right? It takes like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, 3 elements, NPK, to grow food. Most of our food is not mineral dense. We're definitely not getting 100 minerals. None of us are. And we are like highly deficient in these all these different types of minerals from the EMF fields and all these things that pull the minerals out of us, especially pharmaceuticals and whatnot. It's so important to get up to speed on your minerals, because when you're not mineral deficient and you're not pulling all of these toxins from your environment trying to get up to speed on your minerals. So back to the St. Louis, there's cadmium in the air, okay? And cadmium is kind of close to the building blocks of your bones, which is magnesium. And so your body, if you're magnesium deficient or calcium deficient, you'll absorb this radioactive cadmium. It'll go in your bones. And then you don't want radioactive cadmium in your bones. And you're absorbing it from your environment because you're deficient in minerals and your body's trying to get up to speed on your minerals. And so the air and the water and the food, all of your inputs, your body's trying to get the minerals that it needs from it. So if you're up to speed on those minerals, there's literally, out of all those minerals, there's bioavailable plant-based aluminum, barium, strontium. These are chemtrail heavy metal constituents, or chemicals. But if you get the plant-based ones and your body is up to speed on that, it's not going to be absorbing it. If you have enough of your bones and they're solid with minerals, you're not going to be absorbing the wrong thing and putting it in there hopeful that it's the right thing, because your body doesn't know. It thinks it's similar and it's doing it. You know what I mean? So avoid the fluoride, be mineralized, and eat healthy, and be conscious of all that stuff, and you can literally rise above a lot of the levels of the chemtrails that they know, like the toxic levels. So if you're in St. Louis during that time with all that spraying and you were mineralized and doing your Irish sea moss and up to speed on all these things and healthy, you're not going to absorb it as much and be as impacted as other people, basically, is what I'm saying. So there's ways around these things to be empowered, to flip it and be actually like a higher vibrational being out of all this stuff. Even though it seems like, oh, we're being attacked, you can choose to be a victim and live in victimhood, or make it an empowering thing, actually, by rising above it and embracing your sovereignty and turning knowledge plus action into power. Because knowledge isn't really power. Knowledge plus action. It's like doing something about it. Yeah.
Well said, and thanks for that. Yeah, it reminds me also something. There's so much in your documentary FrankenSkies, like you had all this footage of people in the 60s saying, "Oh, Agent Orange is so safe," and da 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 da. Whoa, what a turn that took! And it was again the few kooks, the hippies on the left, screaming, "Agent Orange is bad," and everybody mocking them. Well, we know what history showed, how much damage it did to hundreds of thousands of people or more across this country. It was a horrible thing, and I think yeah, it's so much. Vance, you have a question from the audience? Because again, it's overwhelming, but I like that Irish sea moss. I'm going to check that out. But Vance.
Yeah, one of the questions early on was, do you want to, Matthew, would you like to tell us more about who they in the conspiracies are? Maybe name some names or organizations. I mean, I could rattle them off, but I'm interested. And I think Dissident Jones would like to hear you say who you think the principal perpetrators are.
So that's a question that comes up every single time, all the time, everywhere with it all, because people want to know the who, what, why, where, when, and how in any of these things. Because the primary reason is They want to sink their teeth into it and believe it for themselves, and their brain wants to check these things off the list. But at the end of the day, they want to be able to repeat it to their friend and family and peers, right? Their friends and whatnot. And if their friends are going to ask them the questions and they're not going to know the answers, then they're going to look dumb. So they want to know. And all these, like, it's manipulation through the control mechanisms. They manipulate us. And what they do is through the psychology, there's manipulation through the media, music, television, Hollywood, all that stuff. And they actually socially engineer us to make fun of the conspiracy theorist and to be like, oh yeah, the Illuminati are gonna get you or whatever. So the they is a hard one, and the they is like the people will say, well, how are they doing it to themselves? And all these chemtrail questions come up, and it's remarkable that the same questions come up. So who is the they for chemtrails? Well, I said before, NASA has a program, and the Department of Energy has a program, the CIA has a program, and also the Air Force has a program, and there's all these different things working in conjunction with one another. But like, who is the they with like the agenda at hand, like the Bill Gates? Because Bill Gates is part of this whole thing to dim the sun, and so the they of the geoengineering agenda is Bill Gates. He's like publicly saying, we need to do this. We're going to do this experiment in Sweden.
Yeah, that's in Forbes, by the way. I looked it up just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. So like I could say the they for the chemtrails is Bill Gates, and it's right in the public, and then they can say that to their friends and family, and people can look it up and be like, oh, that's weird. Bill Gates is funding dimming the sun. Like, doesn't the sun like make my plants grow? You know what I mean? Like, doesn't the plants make my plants grow? Right? Also, Monsanto has created aluminum-resistant genetic seeds and plants that don't need much sun to grow. So if Monsanto is creating aluminum-resistant genetic stuff, and Bill Gates says we got to block the sun with aluminum, what goes up must come down. And you got to think about what aluminum does. Aluminum is a patented fire accelerant. Aluminum oxide is a fire accelerant. It's being sprayed on our trees, and it's being sprayed like making like windstorms on top of these fires when we could be making rain on top of these fires. And then the media is saying, oh, what are we going to do? Global warming, fires. Aluminum is getting in people's brains to cause dementia. It mixes with fluoride. It does all this. Look at what it does when it mixes with aluminum. On a deeper spiritual note, they is Satan, man. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. And that's an answer that nobody wants to really go there. And it's hidden in plain sight. There's disclosure all day long. They want you to know that there's karmic law, and you have to basically convict yourselves. Like people right now, it's like, do you want to wear the muzzle or not? Like, oh, well, it's like fear is there for you if you want to choose to be in that frequency. And it's like everyone's being given a choice, and it's all part of it. I mean, like, I firmly believe that there's like angels and demons, basically, for lack of a better word. I think that there's a transhumanism agenda that's at play to the end of this. The end game is a transhumanism agenda. Time is hardly even real, but there's different outcomes of where we're going on this hijacked timeline. So time is kind of real, but where is this going with the Agenda 2030 and the evils that be, and are they in conjunction with like evil aliens or grays or reptilians or whatever? All that's probably angels and demons and biblical at the end of the day. And what I think is probably demons got cast down, and probably souls come here to incarnate in physical form, to go through karmic cycles, to elevate out of consciousness, to vibrate higher with truth, because truth is this amazing, all-encompassing frequency. And as you get out of physical form, you vibrate back to light, and you like shed karmic patterns, and it's this like amazing refining of the human soul, and it's this beautiful place, Earth. But it seems like it's told biblically, like I never was that. I'm not full, like the Pope is evil and all that, but there is something about it still true of good and evil on Earth. And I do think that Earth is a battleground of good and evil. I do believe that. And so there's all this input on each side, and some of these people like Elon Musk seem like they're totally overwhelmed and hijacked probably by the evil side already, and doing their evil bidding, and like being sheep in wolf's clothing or whatever it is, or whatever the opposite, wolf in sheep's clothing. So they at the end game, they want to roll out chemtrails, roll out 5G, roll out all these different experiments on humanity to the point that we end up with a generation that's infertile. And the infertile generation will be bamboozled into being told that they have to transfer their consciousness into like a cyborg long living version of themselves. And this transfer of consciousness and basically negating the existence of a soul is going to, and Rudolf Steiner calls it like an harmonic force. It's like this evil force wants to basically give this rise to a different consciousness, which is just transhumanism, okay, through trickery, you know, and being told that we need this through different lies of falsehoods and all this sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, they're going to say that souls are transferred into bodies. But I think at the end of the day, like lower dimensional entities will be able to have influenced this realm to the degree that they think that they can get themselves bodies for the first time, because they were cast down. They're not allowed to do that here because they're supposed to be like, you know, I don't know. It seems pretty biblical. So at the end of the day, the they gets spiritual in my eyes, you know, and I've had like serious spiritual battles in my life, and I've had even a near-death experience that's like beyond any sort of scientific realm of stuff. And I do think that we're on a spiritual journey towards like there's no way that they can pull off what they're trying to do. The more the darkness shows itself, the more the people are seeing it, waking up to it, and like literally God created this place to have this like program of ascension, and these evil forces think that they can completely hijack God with aluminum and stuff. God created aluminum, you know what I mean? It's like, come on, get with it. Like in the end, they're going to lose, and we're going to be even more empowered by it. But it might be a very crazy ride. So buckle your seatbelts.
Yeah, well
Already
said.
is.
We call them archons here. I agree. Paul calls them that wickedness in high places as above. Yeah, whatever the puppets or the machinery is just an extension of something beyond that's pulling, because it's completely psychopathic. It's completely mechanistic. It's illogical, but it works. So yeah, I agree with you, Matthew. And yeah, any other questions, Vance?
Yeah. Asterox, our friend Anon, wanted to know a little bit more about what other chemicals besides the ones you've mentioned so far are being released by airplanes.
Really depends on where you're at and what they want to do. So there's a researcher, Ann Fillmore, on the coastal Oregon, and she studied these moisture plumes of fog, but they're really orange, and she's found lithium. So lithium seems to be sprayed on different populations, different times for different purposes. Dick Gregory was an activist, black activist in the United States. He's amazing. He died recently. He talked about how they would spray manganese. Manganese makes you aggravated and violent, and they'll spray that on people that they want to get violent. So they would spray that on the black ghettos of New York and whatnot. But I'm sure they do it when they want people protesting, getting all crazy and whatnot. It gets interesting when people start studying like desiccated blood cells and like viral elements trying to ride them on that, and that's fascinating. I don't think they can pull it off to the degree that they want, because they need to normalize it and get it a little lower to the ground, but they're definitely working on it. And what's fascinating is as they roll out the 5G, there's more antennas everywhere, and what they seemingly want at the end of the day is a ground level that's got elevated, aluminized, metallicized air. So imagine they spray the haze, but as it gets to the ground level, they can elevate it through a constant frequency and create, and then that air will be more conductive, and they can really crank their 5G and really mess with people's fertility and sperm cell count and all that sort of stuff. So they spray all sorts of things. they really do. NASA, quote, uses the atmosphere as a laboratory, end quote. So they do all sorts of stuff, and then if it gets really weird and colorful, they'll have to make up a new cloud for it. You can go all the way down the periodic table. There's a researcher that was identifying it to be identical with the coal fly ash. So you've got, back to the Department of Energy, you've got coal burning power plants, and in the smokestacks, there's scrubbers that filter the smoke, and they're supposed to filter that coal with these filters, and then take that soot and like bury it. Basically, they rinse it out, and it's like this sludge, and supposed to put that into a bladder and bury it underground. It's toxic waste. But multiple people said follow the money and show me the research, and there's a lot of discoveries about these going on, this toxic waste going on trains and being sold directly to the Air Force. And so what you have after burning coal is you've got this soot that's already nanoparticulate sized, all these different constituent chemicals, such as cadmium, titanium, nickel, lead. It ends up coming down in the rainwater. There was a researcher, Patrick Roddy, who the jury is really out on him now because he disappeared and went Looney Tunes, but he was doing amazing research at one time, and he had a website, stopsprayingus.com, and he did all the rainwater research, and everyone would send him his rainwater, and it would show up, you name it. Even these incredible particles that are, so basically when you send in your rainwater, most of the time you have to tell them what to test it for. So a lot of people are just like, is there aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, cadmium, lead, lithium in this? But there's all sorts of crazy things on the periodic table, including very rare earth elements that are in television screens. Okay, so I can't remember the rare earth element that should not be coming down in the rainwater and should not be sprayed by chemtrails and should not be in the sky. Very expensive thing that's used in like 3D TVs. So which leads me to briefly talk about Project Bluebeam, because there's all sorts of rabbit holes in the chemtrail world, but one of them is the spraying of enough chemicals and then using ground-based technology to use intersecting radio waves and excite those chemicals. It's called HARP technology. You're basically microwaving the different mixing chemicals, metallics especially. But as you get them all elevated and kind of in this like latticing of layers, you can create a screen by which you can project things on with their technology. And this operation is public. You can look it up, Bluebeam, and it's got a budget and everything. And I'm sure the public money that they say that they spend on it is like a fraction of what the Black Ops money that goes towards it. Because after 9/11, half of Congress's money of checks that they write went Black Ops, and nobody even knows like where that money is going because national security, whatever, so many things going on. But there is this idea of making a screen in the sky to show the second coming of Christ and or some religious thing in the sky for enemies, or to show like an asteroid coming or an alien invasion or whatever. And what I think they might try to pull is an asteroid hitting. So what they could use is their HARP technology that they can make earthquakes with. They could literally fake an asteroid hitting with their projector and their earthquakes and their media in Hollywood, and then like make some crazy tsunami and be like, oh, it was that asteroid or whatever, and really pull off their crazy Georgia Guidestone, New World Order nonsense. Because the Agenda 2030, they're still not on course with all their stupidity and what they've been doing recently. They're still not on course for this weird world dystopia that they want to get us into, and this Klaus Schwab, and he's all like, you will own nothing and you will be happy. How is he going to be our crazy dictator? There needs to be a global event. And so I think that they may utilize anything that happens in the sky in the next 10 years. You all do not believe it, okay? If there's like some crazy asteroid that makes earthquakes, or some aliens, or some weird portal thing, or something crazy, it is planned. It is a falsehood. And at the end of the day, it may even be like this, the false light. Like it could be the second coming of Christ. It'll be the false second coming of Christ. You know, it'll be to trick us to dismantle our intuition and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, like if we can really resonate our gut and see through everything with this firm trust of our gut instinct and this essentially what we do over time by talking to our gut and our heart is we cultivate our instincts, our spiritual BS meter, and then we see through everything, right, immediately. And they don't want that, right? And they want to pull something off before we have our BS meter super refined. And I think they're going to have to pull it off in the next couple of years to trick us or to try to trick humanity. So I feel like that soon they might be pulling out all the stops. I don't want to be like calling doomsday stuff or anything like that, but here we are, and it's going to be an exciting ride. And I'm even making EMF protective clothing made of silver. Sparrow, SPERO is my brand, and Sparrow Gear, sparrowgear.com or Sparrow Gear on Instagram. You can check out the clothing that I make with silver, texting gloves, baby blankets, all sorts of stuff. Even these foam bags that kill your phone, nothing gets through, no tracking, tracing, or anything like that. And it's kind of like the wave of the future, I feel like, because we have to do something about this all-out attack, and we can't just be victims, but it will be empowering to acknowledge it and activate, especially the next generation, by showing them the darkness so that they know that there's light and whatnot, you know?
What about the UFOs and the Tic Tac and all that stuff? You think that's faked? Maybe they're projecting out using some of this technology to, set up people for spending money on investigation of UFOs.
UFOs is like a long rabbit hole. I think that it's more interdimensional and less like, I think it's more like dimensions and vibrations and stuff, less than what NASA says and more something different, because they get us believing these falsehoods. And then when we resonate in falsehoods, it takes away part of our true, authentic, sovereign powers. I mean, there's so much weird sigil magic out there, like even the Starbucks logo and the legal name and all these weird things, the straw man and all this. It's to take away our true powers at the end. And I think that there's nefarious and there's good and bad guys. There's good and bad, probably higher and lower dimensional beings, but can they come into physicality on Earth to like kind of help what's going on here? Because there's a full out battle going on here. Full on. And it's for the future of humanity, and humanity isn't just this like blip. Like we are very amazing co-creator like gods, and like we have this like I think what happens is we get input, which is light and media and stuff, we absorb it through our cells, our skin, and we literally translate it and collectively unconsciously project reality through our third eyes. It's like a projector, I think, something like this. And at the end of the day, reality as we know it in this vibration is actually a co-created consensus reality. So it's like the 100th monkey does shift it, but it's like a consensus of whatever one like is being told reality actually is. And we're such amazing like gods basically. And like that's this thing that's being kept from us. And that's what part of the esoteric occult. They don't want us to know our true powers because we are incredibly powerful beyond their evil BS, you know, because if they're resonating with evil, they definitely probably don't even have souls at this point. And it's like we have these amazing things that they don't have. And so there's most likely, it feels like a full-on battle for us. And so they harness our energy and they have cloaked like clouds that look all weird, and there's all sorts of things going on. Like if I've heard stories of people that start to really like wake up and they have like some serious stuff going on, and then like things happen. Like there's probably nefarious, maybe these grays or whatever. Maybe the grays are demonic entities or whatever. There's good and bad UFOs, and I think there's a battle for us right now. And it's like it all comes down to like our authenticity and how high we want to resonate our vibrations. And we are given choices all the time. And if we're not honoring truth nowadays in this vibration that we live in, then the universe is going to check us until we do, or we'll just self-sabotage ourselves so that we can maybe build karma. And it's very fascinating what's going on. I think the powers that be know that if they traumatize each generation, that they can build trauma and karmic debt to keep us here. So I think wars and all these things are created to keep us here. And it's like a cyclical like trap, but we can snap out of it by knowing it and shining light on it and just perceiving it not through the deception that they try to play.
Ooh, that was well said. And you said you had an NDE. Was that a really pivotal moment? I mean, in your life spiritually, or?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's it's a really personal, like it's got such a lot of backstory, but it was this setup and a long like analysis of it, and I like deeply psychoanalyze, I like analyze everything in my life, you know, like every last bit, like what is the meaning of these things, and it was this setup, like the person who took me to this place, I believe they're not the highest vibration, and they were like being guided by like probably like lower dimensional beings, calm demons or whatever. And I didn't know where I was going that day, and I ended up at the freaking Bohemian Grove, you guys. And I was basically set up. And my life journey has been so distinct as an activist, and now I'm becoming this very successful entrepreneur in this EMF protective clothing, leading the global industry in this whole niche of protection and empowerment and awareness of EMF and what 5G really is and all this sort of stuff. So like my life journey, I feel like the good and light are having a little battle over my destiny or something like that. So I end up at this like overflowing Russian river across the river from the Bohemian Grove, like literally there. And I've never been there before, and I didn't even know that I was there until afterwards. I looked on the map, and there's some really dark energy where I was at. And this young girl who I really cherished, this like I was like a stepdad to this girl at the time. She went in the river and didn't know that it was going to just whisk her away. She like fell off the raft. Either way, I had no choice but to go after her. And she's getting like sucked down the stream. She just looks at me and she's like, Matt, you know, and I just go right after her, swimming down this freaking river. And once I got to her, and this was like some sort of initiation too, I don't know, but and to show me that I'm protected in this weird way or something. I don't know what it really was, but I'll just tell you the story and take it for what it is. And I'm such an open book, and I'm only in my authenticity. This is my story, okay? And here it is. So I swam like crazy, as hard as I could, and I finally got to her. And I had watched her grow up since she was 5, you know, and she wasn't freaking 5 anymore, you guys. She was like 10. And 10-year-olds are not the size of 5-year-olds, especially in a rushing river. And once I got to her, she was scared and tired, and she grabbed my arms, and we went under together, and she clenched me tight, and I pried her off of me in this cold water, and I was like pushing her above the water and trying to hold her, and it was, you know, not going down the way that it was, just like complete adrenaline rushing, like wasn't thinking clearly, whatever. I was trying to hold her up, and I come up to the water, and I say to her, you know, her name's Ocean. I said, Ocean, you have to swim, hun. You have to swim. I cannot hold you. And she says, no, I can't. And she tightens her grip and holds my arms, and we sink like a rock, and we both freaking died, like undoubtedly died together. Because I was out of energy and I couldn't hold myself up, let alone both of us, and it was over. I had exhausted myself, and I had not done what I should have done, which is like kept my distance, and I grabbed her with one arm or whatever. Like I went full on and grabbed her, and like I, you know, in hindsight, I was never a lifeguard or anything like that. In hindsight, I probably should have done it differently. So I vividly, consciously remember what happened next, and I was in like this black blank space, complete blank space, infinite darkness, just nothingness. And not that I believe that that's what happens after you die, but this is where I was. It was in nothingness, and I had no recollection of me, no recollection of my name, no recollection of who I was, nothing, zero. And after what seems like a little bit of time, because it was like an infinite place, this woman's very soft voice comes to me, and she says, well, I guess I have to tell this part of the story. The person who's the mom who brought me there or whatever, that I was dating, this whole story, her name's Amanda, the mom of the girl that died with me. Her name's Amanda. So the voice says, Amanda is going to be very upset. Boom, that was it. And I'm like, oh, who's that? Who am I? And I'm thinking all these different thoughts. And I'm even thinking to myself, I'm in this blank space and this voice is saying this one thing to me, like, what am I going to say back to it? And I was like, well, think about it. Say something. And I'm like, I want to say, who are you? You know? And I go, why? Why is Amanda going to be very upset? And the voice says, because her daughter has just died. And all of this like came back to me, like what had happened or whatever. And the biggest adrenaline rush you could ever imagine. And there I am alive in the river. And I'm like under the water, like coming up. And I look at her and I like push her away. And I'm like one arm trying to hold her and me. And I say, Ocean, you have to swim, hun. And she looks at me and she has this memory of her own, which is she died, but she doesn't want to share exactly what happened with me, what I understand, but she remembers having died. Whatever that means. And she looks at me and she goes, where? And I pushed her as hard as I could. And I go, that way, swim. And I'm like coaching her. I'm like yelling, swim. And I'm trying to swim, but not on top of her. And there's this downed tree. We like grabbed this tree. It's like out of a freaking movie. And I went into shock. I couldn't even pull myself off the shore. And I did end up pulling myself on the shore and I started throwing up. And like I processed the memory like crazy. And I seriously think that something was trying to set me up to like get me out of here, off this plane of consciousness or whatever. And I think that something else was like, no, he's not leaving. And that's effing powerful, you guys. It's so powerful. Like, it's just like, I'm not saying that I'm invincible by any means. I'm not going to be like Superman and whatever or any of that. But there's something very powerful about our purpose here, especially if we know who we are, what we are, and that we have a divine purpose to serve humanity. So I don't know what's next. And that was like this partial initiation. And since then, I've really seen the world a lot differently. And it's been more spiritual and more in this kind of like, you know, I'm really kind of like, I have the ambition of like a freaking lion right now. And I'm not backing down from anything. Like, I'm going to be very successful in my company. And I plan on like, hopefully creating a society that's like a perpendicular parallel world to show like that'll be contagious, to show the world that we don't have to abide by the tyranny that's trying to show its evil face. So I don't know what's going to happen or what my future is, but I have high hopes for myself. Now, I'm not trying to be cocky in any way. I'm just saying, like, I firmly believe that I have a purpose to serve, and whatever it is, it's going to be filled with light. And I think that the world might get dark and weird, and I'm going to shine as bright as I can. So,
what happened to Ocean? I don't think you told us.
She survived. She's happily ice skating right now, probably. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And she's an amazing, beautiful soul. She was born in Asia, and I think she's part of these star seeds that are here to like really save the day. Because these children, when they're being shown the darkness as it's being shown this time, as they age, it's something else. And when she was born in Asia, it's like empress status. When you come out and you're still in the sack, like fully in the sack, it's very rare. And she came out in the sack, and so she's supposed to be special. I think she's very, very, very special. I think neither of us were supposed to die on that day, but the power, the darkness, like really wanted to take us out. But we're not like, I think karma is very real, and I think that like, if you are a bad person, then bad things can happen to you. But if you're not, then the powers that be don't have that leverage, you know. And even if you have done bad things, you can not repent, but you can elevate your consciousness by being good. And it's not like this end all scenario. It's like, we're here to learn, right? and your vibration is your vibration. You can own it. And as you elevate to higher vibrations, none of these things can touch you. So I think that these lessons were meant to be learned in my future, in my past self, so that my future self can resonate even higher and like completely dismantle all of these potential threats that are trying to attack me from a vibrational lower source. They don't even exist on the dimension that I'm trying to elevate to, where everyone else, will be as well.
Ooh, you're speaking my language, man. Well said. I don't know what to say. I'm so inspired. And your incident was before FrankenSkies or after? Or
No, it was right after, but it was just as I was coming out with this the EMF clothing line, which is really important and pivotal, I feel. And it was I mean, still I'm promoting FrankenSkies and making FrankenSkies too, and it's not going to stop. Like
really?
I want to shed the light on and hopefully stop Bill Gates again, because I stopped Bill Gates once in Tucson, Arizona. We had the third global summit to stop geoengineering, and he was there to do this huge experiment through Worldview Enterprises and these high-tech weather balloon things. And David Keith out of Harvard, they were to do this experiment, spraying different size nanoparticulate aluminum aerosols in the sky to see which ones work best to dim the sun there. And we had this conference, packed the house, from people from all over the country, all over the world. We had a concert, we had a protest on Mother's Day for Mother Earth, and the whole city of Tucson, the whole region. They didn't know the chemtrails. They didn't like really get the point that chemtrails were real, but all the environmental groups and everybody around knew and did not want this experiment to go down. And we put it on hiatus. So now they moved it to Sweden, and they're doing it in June in Kiruna, in a time where the sun doesn't set, and they're going to try to, like, through the Swedish NASA and whatnot, normalize this over there. So somehow I want to fight that still, and who knows what my destiny will be. Either way, I've already done so much, and I'm happy to be where I'm at. And even just sharing my story probably is this amazing and inspiring thing. But no, that was April 18th, 2019. The movie came out June 2017, and then here we are. Also, I had this weird feeling that maybe our higher self has our soul working on different timelines. And maybe it's kind of powerful to die on some of the timelines, because then you're more powerful on the timeline that you're present on. I had this weird epiphany, but don't quote me on that one. I think it's important to be open-minded in everything and to not throw away any ideas. And that's the whole point of being a truther activist, is to be able to keep expanding your mind, heart, and soul. And then literally you can get downloads, it seems, because these ideas come from nowhere that end up being true in the end.
Yeah. Do you have any regular spiritual practices?
I try to book in my days where I don't get on the screen for at least 2 hours when I wake up and 2 hours before I go to bed, ideally, because the blue light messes with your sleep cycle, and the flicker rate of the screen messes with your sleep, and all these certain reasons why that's important. And that really helps me in my spiritual practice to have a rhythm, even though I've got a Facebook account with like 60,000 followers, and I've got actualactivists.com, this great website with daily blogs, and I've got my Instagram Sparrow and sparrowgear.com, this online business, and I'm going on all these podcasts and all this stuff. I don't want to be on the computer for at least, or see a screen for at least a couple hours when I wake up. And that alone, I get that morning light, and it's just like I've started to slightly become allergic to it. So like if I wake up and look at it first thing, it's not even cool anymore. It's weird. So there's that. I also try to eat as well as I can. I do coconut oil rinse every single morning. And I know that's not really that spiritual, but what it does is it helps the microbiology of my mouth that connects to my gut biome and my brain and everything. And I've seen the coconut oil literally remove cavities. I've had cavities in my mouth, and I've watched them go to nothing because of just a coconut oil rinse for a few weeks every single morning, because it balances the bacteria and has the beneficial bacteria thriving, which eats away the bad guys and whatnot. A glass of water first thing in the morning, I think, is very important. I think the first thing you put in your body is important. It should be fruit. I'm not always as good as I could be at this, but the first thing you put in your body in the day should be fruit. And lastly, nature. I've never regretted getting out into nature, but sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Getting out into nature in one form or another, it's always rewarding. It's a balancing of the electricity of your body. It's called grounding, the Schumann resonance. It's like 7.8 hertz, but it's literally a pulse, a frequency that our body resonates with. That is the frequency of the earth. And like LED lights, for instance, they're flickering on and off with blue light, which is just like UV to our body. So we think it's sunlight. It throws off our whole cycle. It's flickering on and off like 10,000 times a second. LED lights are totally toxic. There's all these different forms of light that are toxic. We got to learn about incandescent bulbs, and that's another thing about the balancing of our lives. But especially gardening, getting on the earth, and getting grounded. I mean, my last name is Landman. I really need to be in the earth and find that balance. And I think also, lastly, being in touch with the stars and even just the moon. Like the moon is always in my bedroom window, a certain time. The moon comes up a certain spot. The sun is always going to come up that spot in June, that spot in July, that spot in December. Like just being in touch with this sky clock is very grounding also. And then you start to see like, oh, wow, that full moon, they really chemtrailed it. Why? You know, or why is that sunset so chemtrailed? Like they're trying to disrupt us from getting that light, because there's a whole progression of light, these frequencies. Okay, if you see everything as light, then there's the morning light of the sun, and then the later day light, and then the evening light of the sun, and then the moonlight, and there's all these different lights as a spectrum that are going through their progressions. And when they're interrupted with chemtrails, it's interrupting these specific like downloads basically that our body is supposed to be tuned with. Even if it's just throwing off our circadian rhythm and whatnot, that messes with our biofields and everything, because everything in our body, down to our cells and our neurology and neurosystem and everything, it's all electricity and rhythm, you know. And throwing off our light rhythms in the sun and everything through the chemtrails is important to recognize, so that we can, you know, get that rhythm back through grounding or earthing or nature or whatever it may be. So I think less is more with the screen time. I try to unplug to recharge, kind of thing. I think that's the best spiritual practice we can really have nowadays, because it's so easy to be always on your device all the time. I mean, like, put that thing away and go out into nature by yourself. You don't need to get that text message or that update or know what the weather is or whatnot. And then also learning about like putting your phone on airplane mode when you go to bed or something. You don't have to have your phone on you next to you. It's important to know that that thing can mess with your sleep and whatnot. And you can put it in the other room or get it out of your bed or whatever, but just know these certain things to be grounded, and know that you're a being of rhythm, of cycles, of light, and honor that rhythm and keep that rhythm like balanced.
Good advice. Yeah, I never sleep with a phone in the same room as I am. I do maybe 20 minutes or half an hour with device off before I go to bed or wake up. You know, like you, imperfectly trying to fumble towards ecstasy or awakening. So we're doing the best we can. And Ben, so any questions or you from the audience?
Oh, let's see. I've got a couple. Have you heard of Orgonite, and do you think there's any value in it? Tower Busters, DR Sanguine asked that.
Yeah, it is what it is with that one. It's like the human intention behind it is powerful. The Wilhelm Reich technology, like he's very fascinating and amazing. I've got a bunch of his books in my library, and he was onto a lot. Is his technology being replicated in like some plastic pyramid? Somewhat, but not necessarily. If you put that plastic pyramid and bury it next to a cell tower, is your kid no longer going to get cancer if you live right next to that thing? You know, placebo is really strong. There's placebo that's really strong. But at the end of the day, I think activism is powerful. Knowing your limitations and not living next to that cell tower is very powerful. There's a lot, you know, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation stuff out there that like, oh yeah, well, all you did was bury that pyramid. You're a great activist. Now go sit on your couch. You know, that's kind of the game they play, is to make you think that you've done something with something that you didn't do anything. And then the next time you see it rain, you're like, oh, look, I did that. They told me so. You know, so I witnessed a lot of that in the activism space. And really, I think just like you'd be a lot better off just going to a sauna and maybe an Epsom salt bath and getting in your body and exercising and maybe go and talk to your mayor and say you don't want that cell tower on your street or whatever, and bring up to your mayor that RIP on Ripon, California, there was a elementary school that removed the Sprint cell tower because it was giving the kids cancer. And you can get active and empowered and even tell your neighbors and educate them. And there's so many other things that you can do besides buy someone's pyramid made out of plastic and burying it in the ground next to your cell tower, thinking that something was done there. Those Orgonite pyramids, I have EMF readers. I've got readers. I've got things that measure the radiation coming off of cell phones and smart meters and Wi-Fi and all that. These pyramids, no matter how big they are, these Orgonite, Orgone pyramids, they don't impact the radiation. They don't change the numbers on the thing. You know, people sell the crap out of these things, but at the end of the day, they also sell stickers that go on your phone that supposedly transmute the energy and don't give you cancer and all these things. But they're literally selling you a sticker for $20 that cost them 5 cents to make. And at the end of the day, you're really just being gullible because you're believing them for nothing. You're just believing them because they said so. So sometimes it's important to not listen to just me and to do the research and figure it out on your own. Maybe get yourself an EMF meter and not be like, oh, well, I put the sticker on my iPhone 10 Plus and, you know, I sleep with it, but the sticker's there and therefore I'm, you know, not a victim to this technology. It's like mind over matter is something and also it's nothing. So that's my answer.
All righty. Also, do you have any DW the Wild Beat asks, do you have any thoughts on the mud flood / Tartary theory?
Oh yeah, that's all great. There was definitely history that's hidden from us and like 1,000 years probably added on. There's terraforming that seems to have gone down. You know, who has the technology to terraform stuff? It seems like that California was maybe an island before, according to old maps, and now it's got a very sensitive tectonic thing that they could use, you know, to maybe just. There's a lot of stuff going on in that space. It seems like definitely things were terraformed. Definitely like all of the trees are the same size and like all a couple hundred years old. You can't tell me they were all like everywhere chopped down. That doesn't make any sense. This Tartary, it's very fascinating. There was free energy. These world fairs, the world fairs is so fascinating. The Buffalo World Fair is huge. And they were able to transmit harnessed electricity from the etheric waterfall of Niagara Falls. They were able to harness that electricity, transmit it wirelessly 20 miles to Buffalo, New York. This is fact. You look it up on Wikipedia. It's like everyone witnessed this thing. They could, and then this tower transmitted the energy, free electricity, you know, along this Buffalo World Fair. The Eiffel Tower, yeah, Tesla technology. The Eiffel Tower was a free energy device. So the powers that be, the Rockefellers and all that, they have metered us with electricity that's probably free. And I mean, I think the electricity thing might be a huge hoax because energy is free. And at the end of the day, it really enslaves us. So they had to get us believing all these lies, otherwise we'd be, I mean, riding around on these airships and getting free energy boosts off the you know, tall buildings. Like these like the Hindenburg, they were plugging along and then getting their energy charges from these like energy devices off of buildings, like the Empire State Building was like charging them up and stuff. So there's a history that was totally quelled, and a new history given to us to create potentially a new future. The present has been warped, and we've been bamboozled by technology, the introduction of the television, and then the immediate moon landing, and then all of this tech in our faces. This is all by design to enslave humanity and to convince us that we don't need our souls and that we can believe in technology over souls, it seems. So there was a seemingly humanoid ascension thing going down, and the powers that be maybe like messed with our DNA and all sorts of things. Yeah, there's definitely a false narrative going on, and also I think that's being hijacked. Okay, there's people that I know are not who they claim, who are like authoring books on the mudfloods and stuff to make it not as believable, which makes me think it's even more believable and stuff like that. There's a lot of lies on top of it, and there's a lot of truth on top of it. And at the end of the day, you got to trust your gut. And yeah, there's some truth. There's a lot of truth there. I think that like probably 250 years probably ago, there was a completely advanced civilization that maybe even went through like their whole ascension thing and they vibrated beyond a frequency that would exist here in this vibration, which is kind of a low vibration if you think about it. We should have been getting higher, and we're kind of slipping because of the mechanisms that are getting us to project that fear frequency. That's why it's so important for everyone to rise above it and to see where we're at and to know what's going on. So that history was covered up. All of it was covered up. And I think that where I live in Ashland, Oregon, I'm on like 1 mile of dirt, I feel like, and underneath there's like probably some city or something. There's all sorts of things that have been covered up through terraforming, I believe. And yeah, that's another wild rabbit hole. It's amazing. What an amazing journey we're on to wear all these hats and to have these open minds and to feel all these things out. It's such a journey, such a quest. So yeah, keep digging on that one, you all. I've seen remnants, even where I live, of what must be etheric energy devices of sorts, but I can't really understand it. It's at these like intersections of rivers where it looks like rock, but they're like stacked like square Legos, and that kind of rock formation is not anywhere else except for on these like certain energetic points where it wouldn't make. It's just there's things that are starting to add up as I get little bits of it. It's all starting to add up. It's like a holistic approach, like you said earlier. Everything starts to make sense when you start to get the different pieces of the puzzle and the resonance can occur.
Yeah, Vance and I are actually going to do a show soon on it, I guess. So for you audience, we will expand. I know my wife is much into the Tartary thing, but I never listen to her because she always wants to talk about it when the kids are screaming or the dogs are barking. And I don't want to hear about the World Fair, and it's just bad timing. So, but we'll get to it. We will get to it. And yeah, as we're getting to the end, is there one more movie you want to play, Matt, for the audience?
Let's do that last clip of the two. They're drones, but when you can see these two planes, like obviously not even
this one?
like flinching. Yeah.
All right, here you go for the audience. It was good.
What the heck?
Did you film that, or did just somebody provide that for you?
No, someone sent it to me, but it gets pretty popular because people want to think that the planes are just regular air traffic, and they're not at all. I mean, come on, think about it. Are that many planes zigzagging over your house on any given day? These are drones. These are drones, and there is a full-on, very expensive agenda going on right above your head. And to understand the full orchestration of all these things is mind-boggling, but it's happening. And so those two planes were actually picking a focal point to mix their chemicals together. So those two plumes of chemtrails unravel, and those two chemicals, whatever they may be, whether it be barium and strontium or this and that, they activate by mixing together, and the fallout comes right down on the plants and everything. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it reminds me, there's a movie, Josh Whedon Serenity, based on the Firefly series. And it's interesting because there's this colony that's so far away from the Empire, it's science fiction. So they can't get, cops or sheriffs out there. So they simply they start pumping this new colony with a chemical that makes them docile all over the colony. Seems like a smart solution, but the problem is that people they lose their will to live. They sit there on their desks at work or watching TV. They don't want to eat or drink, and the whole colony literally dies. And then of course, the government then covers up, and then the heroes find out, yada yada. So, again, playing God? I think that's the problem with these. They want to play God, and they shouldn't. But yeah, and you never know with Josh Whedon. He's always into something.
Do you guys know about Flight Radar 24? It's an internet site that you can actually identify aircraft that are flying over you. So I wonder if some people use that. I had it. Here, I'll share my screen just real quick. Yeah. Okay, we do this, and there it is. You can actually pick a plane, and it'll tell you what flight it is. So wouldn't it be interesting if there were planes flying over you thought were spraying things on you, and you clicked on it and it was some mysterious plane, that wasn't identified?
Yeah, I like that one. I like that a lot. It's a nice reference point, but sometimes it's not trustworthy. But it's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool.
They might fake it. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't show up either. It's like it doesn't. There's nobody.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Those are the ones you got to be careful. They run inside. Get your gas mask on.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we probably should end it, as it's been an excellent discussion. For the audience, check out more of Matt's work. I'll have it on the show notes, Matt. But where can people find out more about? Tell us some links or where to find out more about your work.
Yeah, please, FrankenSkies.com. Great spot to share the movie with everybody and send it to your people. And even if you just watch the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes of FrankenSkies, it's very eye-opening. You can learn something for sure. Anyone can. So FrankenSkies.com. And then also actualactivists.com. It's a nice one-stop shop resource for all sorts of truth and like health and 5G information and GMO, you name it, and that's amazing. And then please find me on for the website for the EMF Protective Silver clothing. It's Spero is the brand. Spero, Spero. It's a Latin word. It means hope. So Spero Gear, GEAR.com. Please check us out over there. Just come take a look, even if you don't want to buy anything. That I really appreciate the support. And on Instagram, same thing, Spero Gear. And then on Facebook, Matt Landman. And I really appreciate you guys. And thanks for being so awesome and open-minded and real. And thanks for, shining your light in this weird, dark time that we're all in. We need everybody doing what we can because we're all, I hate this hijacked word, but I'm going to say it anyways. We're all in this together, So I'm going to take it back. I'm taking it back.
Yeah. We want the Landman fighting for our skies. It's ironic in a way, but good deal. Yeah, loved your documentary. Love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And Vance, thank you, and you keep doing what you're doing, Vance.
Always. And thanks. Great to meet you, Matt. And glad you could come on with us.
Indeed. And for the audience, thanks for the chat room. Audio version will be out in a couple of days. Of course, it'll be on YouTube. We got great shows. Again, we're going to deal with Tartary and the mud floods and all that. Gary Lockman will be on to talk about dream precognition. Becca Tarnas is going to talk about insights into the spirituality with Tolkien and Carl Jung. So good shows coming around for everyone to navigate these crazy times, this seas of fate that we live in here in the Black Iron Prison. But I'm glad you're here, and together we are Indra's Net, lighting up the universe where everybody inspires everybody and nobody is more important than everybody. So great show. Don't forget about the Astronosis conference, my voiceover availability. Support me, support Matt, support all the independent people out there so we can overthrow the mass monsters, the octopuses, the mass media, the corporate powers, all that stuff that, is just keeping us asleep for centuries and centuries. So I'm off my soapbox, but Matt, thank you very much for coming on the show. And everyone, thank you so much for being here. You guys are great. You have so much potential, and keep writing your own gospel and living your own myth, as I say. Good night, everyone.